Those were the last words Sarah's grandfather ever said to her, whispered through a phone line crackling with static 3 weeks ago. She'd been 7 years old the last time she'd seen him, 25 years of silence between them, and now he was dead, leaving her a lighthouse and a warning she didn't understand. But standing here now at the top of the tower with a hand on a crystal that pulsed like a heartbeat, watching impossible shapes rise from an ocean that shouldn't exist, Sarah finally understood why her mother had driven away in the middle of the night all those years ago. And she understood that she had less than 60 seconds to figure out how to save the world. Let me take you back to where this all began, 3 days earlier. 3 days earlier. The letter from the estate lawyer arrived on a Tuesday. Sarah Chen was eating leftover Chinese food in her cramped Boston apartment, scrolling through job listings she was overqualified for when the thick cream envelope slid under her door. Inside was a key, a deed, and a single line. Your grandfather's last will and testament requires your immediate presence at Widow's Point Lighthouse, Maine. Sarah stared at the key. Brass, old, worn smooth by generations of hands. She hadn't thought about her grandfather in years, hadn't been allowed to think about him really. Her mother's rules had been absolute. No questions about Grandpa Chen, no questions about Widow's Point, no questions about why they'd left in the middle of the night when Sarah was 7. But her mother was dead now too, cancer 6 months ago, and whatever secret she'd been keeping had died with her. Sarah picked up the key. It was warm to the touch, warmer than it should have been. She booked a bus ticket that night. The closer Sarah got to Widow's Point, the stranger things became. The bus driver, an elderly woman with piercing blue eyes, took one look at the address Sarah had written down and said, "You're a Chen, aren't you? You have the look." When Sarah asked what she meant, the woman just shook her head and said, "Your grandfather was a good man, carried a burden none of us could understand. I'm sorry, it's your turn now." Sarah had no idea what that meant. The last town before Widow's Point was a place called Mercy Harbor, population 347. Sarah stopped for coffee at the only diner, a salt-weathered building with fishing nets on the walls. The moment she walked in, conversation stopped. A dozen pairs of eyes turned toward her. The waitress, a woman about Sarah's age, poured her coffee without being asked. "You're going to the lighthouse." It wasn't a question. "How did you?" "We always know when a keeper comes home." The waitress glanced at the other patrons who'd returned to their quiet conversations. "Your grandfather, he kept the light for 47 years. Before him, his father. Before that, his mother. Back and back, nearly 200 years of Chen's watching the point." Watching for what? The waitress's expression turned somber. "You'll find out soon enough, but here's what I can tell you. On nights when the light burns brightest, we see things in the water. Shadows too big to be whales, moving in patterns no living thing should move. Your grandfather kept them at bay, kept us safe." She leaned in closer. "Question is, can you?" Sarah left the diner with more questions than answers and a growing sense of dread. Widow's Point. The lighthouse stood at the end of a narrow peninsula, connected to the mainland by a causeway that disappeared under the waves at high tide. Sarah arrived at low tide, just as the sun was setting. The lighthouse was taller than she remembered, or maybe she'd just been smaller. 70 feet of white stone, weathered by a century and a half of Atlantic storms, topped with a beacon that hadn't been lit in 3 weeks. 3 weeks since her grandfather died. Sarah approached the door, the brass key heavy in her hand. As she raised it to the lock, she heard something, a sound like singing, but not quite. It came from the ocean, carried on the salt wind, in a language she'd never heard, but somehow almost understood. The key turned smoothly, the door opened, and Sarah Chen stepped into her inheritance. The spiral staircase wound up into darkness. Sarah clicked on her phone's flashlight and began to climb, counting steps automatically. 15, 30, 45. The walls were covered in markings. At first, Sarah thought they were water stains, but as she looked closer, she realized they were deliberate, symbols carved into the stone, worn smooth by time. Some she recognized from her childhood, fragments of dreams she'd had and forgotten, images that had haunted the edges of her memory for 25 years. At step 93, she found the first date, 1847. At step 120, 1923. At step 147, 1967. And at step 168, 1989. The year her mother had taken her and run. Sarah's heart was pounding now, and not just from the climb. Each of those dates corresponded to something she was certain. Maritime disasters, storms, something worse. At step 200, she reached the main room. It was exactly as she remembered from her childhood. The same worn desk, the same navigation charts covering the walls, the same smell of salt and oil, and something else, something that made the hair on her arms stand up. But it was the mechanism in the center of the room that made Sarah freeze. It was massive, brass and crystal and clockwork, far more complex than any lighthouse beacon had a right to be. Gears within gears, astronomical dials marked with symbols from a dozen different cultures, and at its heart, a crystal the size of a human head that pulsed with a faint, rhythmic light, like a heartbeat. Sarah approached slowly. On the desk, a leather-bound logbook lay open. Her grandfather's handwriting filled the page. April 3rd. The cycle completes again. 47 years I've stood watch, as my father did before me and his mother before him. The burden passes now. Sarah will come. She must come. The lighthouse doesn't call to everyone, but it has called to her since she was a child. Sarah's hands trembled as she turned the page. She'll understand what her mother never could. Some lights don't just warn ships away from danger. Some lights hold the danger at bay. The truth begins to surface. Sarah spent the next hour reading through the logbook, flipping backward through decades of entries. Her grandfather's voice came through clearly, meticulous observations of weather patterns, celestial events, tide tables. But interspersed throughout were stranger entries. The visitors are restless tonight. The boundary holds, but thinner than I'd like. 3 ships passed today. They saw only a lighthouse. The veil remained strong. Dreamed of the other ocean again. They wanted me to know they mean us no harm, but harm would come nonetheless if the light failed. Other ocean? Visitors? Boundary? Sarah's phone buzzed, making her jump. 1 bar of signal, barely there. A text from a number she didn't recognize. This is Margaret Winters. I was your mother's friend. She made me promise that if you ever went to the lighthouse, I'd tell you the truth she couldn't. Call me, please, before it's too late. Sarah dialed immediately. The woman who answered sounded elderly, frightened. Oh God, Sarah, you need to leave that lighthouse right now. What? Why? What's going on? Your mother, she never told you about the night she left? She never told me anything. A long pause. Then, your grandfather wasn't just the lighthouse keeper. The lighthouse isn't just a lighthouse. It's a seal, a boundary between our world and somewhere else. And your family has been keeping that boundary intact for nearly 200 years. Sarah laughed, a brittle sound. That's insane. Is it? Look at the mechanism, Sarah. Really look at it. Does it look like any lighthouse beacon you've ever seen? Sarah turned to the brass and crystal apparatus. It didn't. It looked like nothing she'd ever seen, like something between an orrery, an astrolabe, and a machine for purposes she couldn't begin to guess. The night your mother left, Margaret continued, she found your grandfather in what he called communion with the visitors. She saw him standing in front of that mechanism while it glowed with light that shouldn't exist, saw the walls of the lighthouse become translucent, saw things in the water that made her understand she'd been living next to something impossible her entire life. It broke something in her. She grabbed you and ran. That can't be real. Is it? Your grandfather tried to tell her it was safe, that the visitors meant no harm, that the lighthouse protected everyone precisely because it allowed those things to exist safely in their own realm instead of bleeding into ours. But she couldn't accept it. She spent the rest of her life trying to make sure you'd never have to face what she'd faced. Thunder rumbled outside. The lighthouse shuddered. "Sarah," Margaret's voice turned urgent. "How long has it been since your grandfather died?" 21 weeks. Oh, God. Oh, no. The light hasn't been maintained for 3 weeks? The lighthouse shuddered again, harder this time. The crystal in the mechanism flickered, and for just a moment, Sarah could have sworn the walls became translucent. Through them, Sarah saw water, but not the Atlantic Ocean. This water glowed with bioluminescent light, and vast shapes moved in its depths. "Sarah? Sarah, what's happening?" The phone slipped from Sarah's hand.
The walls were definitely transparent now. The brass mechanism spun faster, gears clicking with increasing urgency. The crystal's pulse accelerated, matching Sarah's racing heartbeat. And in that other ocean, that impossible glowing ocean that existed in the same space as the Atlantic, but somehow separate from it, the shapes were rising. Sarah's childhood rushed back in a flood of forgotten memories, playing in this very room while her grandfather worked, seeing the walls shimmer and become see-through, watching beautiful, terrifying things drift through waters that existed sideways to reality. Her grandfather's gentle voice, "Don't be afraid, little starfish, they're just curious. As long as the light burns, they stay in their ocean, and we stay in ours." Her mother finding them, the screaming, the terror in her mother's eyes, being dragged away while her grandfather called after them, "Margaret, please, you don't understand." Sarah staggered to the desk, scattering journals and charts. She needed to understand, needed to know what to do. She grabbed the oldest journal, leather cracked with age. The first entry was dated 1847. "The lighthouse is complete. We told the maritime authorities it was built to warn ships from the rocks, and this is true. But it serves a greater purpose known only to the keepers. There are places where the boundaries between worlds grow thin. Widow's Point is such a place. The visitors come from a realm where different laws govern reality, where time flows in directions we have no names for, where the fundamental forces that shape our universe operate according to alien principles. They do not mean us harm, but their mere presence in our waters would make the ocean uninhabitable for our world's life. The light, the mechanism, maintains a barrier. Not a wall, but a separation. They can observe our world, study it, perhaps even communicate, but they cannot cross over, and we cannot accidentally cross into their realm. This is the compact, this is the duty, this is the burden that will pass from keeper to keeper, generation to generation, until the stars themselves grow cold." The brass mechanism stuttered. One of the gears slipped, missing its rhythm. The crystal's light flickered and dimmed. In the other ocean, the vast shapes surged upward. Sarah could see them clearly now, geometries that hurt to look at, forms that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions, colors that had no names, beautiful and terrible and utterly alien. The temperature plummeted. Frost spread across the brass mechanism in fractal patterns that looked almost like writing. Sarah grabbed the most recent maintenance log, flipping frantically through her grandfather's notes. Pages and pages of technical instructions, astronomical calculations, gear ratios, crystal attunement frequencies. And there, in the margin of the last page, written in a shaping hand, "Sarah, if you're reading this, the light has failed. Emergency protocol. Turn the eastern dial to align with Sirius. It will stabilize the boundary temporarily. Then begin to learn. I'm sorry. I tried to prepare you as a child, but your mother. I'm so sorry, but there's no one else. The lighthouse has chosen you. It always chooses who it needs. Trust yourself. Trust the light, and whatever you do, don't let it go out." The mechanism shuddered violently.
Another gear slipped. The crystal dimmed further. Through the transparent walls, one of the vast shapes pressed against the boundary. Where it touched, reality itself seemed to warp, colors bleeding into impossible spectrums, space folding in on itself. Sarah's hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the journal. She looked at the mechanism, found the Eastern dial, marked with astronomical symbols that her childhood self had known, that some part of her still remembered. The shapes in the other ocean were so close now. She could feel their attention, ancient and patient and curious. They were aware of her. They'd been aware of her since she was 7 years old, watching them through these same transparent walls. 30 seconds, maybe less. Sarah made her choice. The compact renewed. She lunged for the Eastern dial and turned it, her hands guided by instinct and half-remembered childhood lessons. Through the transparent ceiling, she could see the stars, the real stars, and somehow other stars simultaneously, constellations from both universes overlapping. There, Sirius, the dog star. She aligned the dial. The mechanism caught with a sound like a bell. The crystal blazed brilliant white. The gears smoothed into their proper rhythm, clicking and whirring in patterns that suddenly seemed less like mechanics and more like music. The vast shapes in the other ocean halted their rise. They hung at the boundary, patient once more. Sarah collapsed against the desk, gasping. The transparent walls gradually faded back to stone, but she could still sense the other ocean out there, separated from this one by nothing more than the light from the crystal and the turning of brass gears. Her phone buzzed on the floor. She picked it up. Margaret's frantic texts covered the screen. "Sarah, are you okay? What happened? Please respond." Sarah typed with trembling fingers. "I'm okay. The light is stable. For now." The response came immediately. "Oh, thank God. What are you going to do?" Sarah looked around the lighthouse room, at the journals stacked everywhere, 200 years of accumulated knowledge, at the charts and calculations and maintenance logs, at the mechanism that required constant adjustment, calibration to celestial events both in this universe and the one beyond the boundary. It would consume her life, just as it had consumed her grandfather's life, just as it had consumed every keeper's life since 1847. But as she sat there, feeling the pulse of the crystal in her bones, sensing the vast and patient curiosity of the beings in the other ocean, Sarah felt something unexpected, a sense of coming home. She typed, "I'm staying. Someone has to." Another message popped up, this one from a different number, her mother's old phone, which Sarah had kept active, paying the bill each month without really knowing why. But her mother was dead, had been dead for 6 months. With shaking hands, Sarah opened the message. "I'm sorry I couldn't be brave enough to tell you the truth. I'm sorry I tried to keep you from your destiny. I was so afraid, Sarah, afraid of what it would cost you. But if you're reading this, and the lawyer was supposed to send it only if you actually went to the lighthouse, then you've made your choice. The lighthouse chose you, and you chose it back. I wish I could be there to help you understand. I wish I'd been strong enough to stay and teach you what you need to know, but I wasn't. Your grandfather was the strong one, and I think you are too. I love you. I'm proud of you. Even if I never got to say it, even if I ran, I'm proud. Keep the light burning, my darling girl. Keep the boundaries safe, and know that every keeper who came before you is watching, rooting for you, standing with you in spirit, if not in flesh. You're not alone. You were never alone." Sarah sat in the lighthouse as the storm raged outside, and wept. The new keeper. 3 months later, Sarah had established a routine. Dawn. Check the mechanism's alignment with the rising sun, make minor adjustments to the crystal's frequency, log the night's observations. Morning. Study the journals. She'd made it through the 1920s now, learning about a keeper named James Chen, who developed new techniques for maintaining the boundary during solar storms. Afternoon. Maintenance. Oil the gears, polish the crystal, calculate the positions of stars that wouldn't rise for weeks yet. Evening. Watch the sun set over the other ocean, visible now that she'd learned how to shift her perception. Observe the visitors as they drift through their realm, going about purposes she couldn't begin to understand. Night. Communion. That's what her grandfather had called it, sitting before the mechanism as it pulses with light, opening her mind to the awareness of the beings beyond the boundary. They didn't communicate in words exactly, more like impressions, emotions, mathematical concepts that felt like poetry. They were grateful they'd learned, grateful for the keepers who had maintained the boundary for nearly 2 centuries, allowing them to study this universe without damaging it, grateful for the light that let both worlds exist in the same space safely. And they were curious about Sarah. They remembered her from childhood, remembered the wonder in her 7-year-old eyes. They'd hoped she'd return. The people of Mercy Harbor had started visiting, bringing food, offering help with repairs, sharing stories about her grandfather. The waitress from the diner, whose name was Emma, came every Thursday. "We're all glad you're here," Emma said one evening, helping Sarah replace a worn gear in the mechanism. "After your grandfather died, the fish started acting strange, whales beaching themselves, birds flying in circles. We didn't know what was wrong, but we knew something was. The boundary was weakening," Sarah said. "If I'd waited another few days. But you didn't. You came. You stayed. You chose the light." Sarah smiled. "The light chose me first."
6 months later, the winter solstice brought the strongest test yet. a celestial alignment that happened once every 50 years, putting stress on the boundary between worlds. Sarah had been preparing for weeks, guided by her grandfather's journals and by the visitors themselves, who'd somehow impressed upon her the adjustments she'd need to make. As the sun set on the shortest day of the year, Sarah stood before the mechanism, hands on the controls, feeling the pulse of both universes in her bones. The walls became fully transparent. The other ocean blazed with light as countless visitors gathered to witness the alignment from their side of the boundary. Sarah made the final adjustment. The crystal sang, actually sang, a note that resonated through both realities. The boundary held. And in that moment, standing in the lighthouse her family had tended for 7 generations, Sarah Chen felt the presence of every keeper who'd come before. Her grandfather, his father, his mother, back and back, nearly 200 years of Chens, all of them watching, all of them proud. "We did it," she whispered to the empty room that wasn't empty at all. The visitors in the other ocean pulsed in what she'd learned to recognize as their equivalent of joy. Sarah logged the successful alignment, just as her grandfather would have done, just as every keeper had done before her. Then she made a new entry, the first in 6 months that was truly her own. "The burden is heavy, but it's mine now, and I carry it willingly. The light burns, the boundary holds, both worlds are safe. This is the compact, this is the duty, this is the honor. And I would choose it again, every time." Outside, the lighthouse beacon blazed against the winter sky, seen by fishing boats as a simple warning light. But inside, in spaces between spaces, it was so much more. It was a bridge, a seal, a promise. And Sarah Chen, the newest in a long line of keepers, stood watch over wonders the world would never know existed, keeping humanity safe from beauty too alien to comprehend. The light would not fail, not on her watch. The end.